course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail, whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one
than this administration.
Well, I heard his speech, and I tell you, you're talking about JD's speech, right?
Yes, sir.
I heard his speech, and he talked about freedom of speech, and I think it's true in Europe. It's losing. They're losing their wonderful right of freedom of speech. I see it. I mean, I thought he made a...
Unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds them.
That there should be an irreversible path for Ukraine to NATO membership.
And you have backed away from that, to be absolutely clear.
No, obviously nobody was expecting that to be immediate. It was a pathway over time.
Have been stagnating. So if we look at the first 3 months of this year, the market share for new electric cars is exactly the same as it was 12 months ago. It's been steadily growing previous to that, but it has now stagnated. We've got a 2030 deadline for the end of new petrol and diesel car sales. So what we need to be seeing is it steadily increasing, and flatlining is almost going backwards at the moment. So we do need to pick up the pace.
Hey there. If you enjoy staying informed and discovering stories that matter, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's free, and your support really helps us create even more amazing content for you. Join us on this journey. You won't regret it. At the Munich Security Conference, a global gathering of top diplomats, security officials, and world leaders, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced a moment of intense scrutiny that few had anticipated. What was meant to be an opportunity for Britain to reaffirm its leadership on the international stage turned into a stark reality check, exposing weaknesses in the UK's approach to free speech, economic policies, and its standing among allies. The turning point came when the US Vice President took the stage, delivering what initially appeared to be a routine diplomatic address. However, the speech quickly evolved into a sharp critique of Europe's and particularly Britain's retreat from core democratic values. In a few cutting sentences, the Vice President dismantled Starmer's credibility, drawing attention to policies that have raised concerns about the erosion of fundamental freedoms. The speech painted a troubling picture of a Britain that, rather than standing firm in its historic commitment to free speech and civil liberties, was increasingly adopting laws and practices that curbed public discourse and criminalised dissent. One of the most striking examples cited was the case of Adam Smith Connor, a British Army veteran who was prosecuted simply for standing near an abortion clinic and silently praying. Without holding signs or engaging with anyone, he was still found guilty under the UK's new buffer zone laws, which restrict actions that could be interpreted as influencing a person's decision within 200 metres of an abortion facility. The Vice President made it clear, when a government begins punishing its citizens for their thoughts, it ceases to function as a democracy. The reaction in the room was palpable. Foreign diplomats and security officials shifted uncomfortably as whispers circulated about the broader implications of Britain's trajectory. The Vice President's speech did not stop at free speech concerns. Another major point of contention was Britain's increasingly aggressive push towards net zero policies, which have led to significant economic consequences, particularly in the automotive sector. European leaders are beginning to question whether the UK's rapid transition to electric vehicles, EVs, is financially sustainable. British car manufacturers are struggling, factories are closing, and thousands of jobs are being lost as the industry grapples with government-imposed mandates. Meanwhile, EV sales have stagnated, infrastructure remains inadequate, and the high cost of ownership has led many consumers to turn away from electric vehicles. At home, frustration with Starmer's policies is mounting. In the British Parliament, Reform UK leader Richard Tice openly criticised the government's handling of net zero targets, arguing that they were directly responsible for the collapse of the UK's once thriving automotive industry. He pointed out that manufacturers across Europe were suffering huge financial losses as they attempted to comply with increasingly stringent EV regulations. These job losses are a direct result of net zero, Tice declared, warning that the government's unrealistic targets were leading to economic devastation. In response, Labour's Jonathan Reynolds defended the government's commitment to electrification, dismissing concerns as exaggerated. He insisted that traditional internal combustion engine vehicles had no future and that Britain needed to stay ahead of the curve. However, his assurances did little to convince sceptics, particularly as other European nations such as Germany and France have started re-evaluating their climate policies to better protect jobs and economic stability. For Starmer, the conference was a moment of reckoning. He had no immediate response to the Vice President's critique, no strong defence of Britain's policies, and no clear strategy to address the growing concerns from both allies and domestic critics. The world watched as Britain, a nation that once prided itself on its commitment to free speech, civil liberties, and economic resilience, was now struggling to justify policies that many view as restrictive and economically damaging. The Munich Security Conference was supposed to be an opportunity for Britain to showcase its strength and leadership. Instead, it became a moment of vulnerability for its Prime Minister. With diplomatic allies raising concerns, industry leaders sounding the alarm, and domestic opposition mounting, Starmer faces a defining challenge. Will he course correct and acknowledge the need for more balanced policies? Or will he continue down a path that risks further economic instability and international isolation? One thing is clear: this conference will not be remembered as a triumph for Britain, but as the moment its leader stood before the world and had no answers.